I'm Jocelyn Parker, 30 years old, a software engineer who spent 8 years bankrolling my family. I paid my dad's medical bills, my sister's rent, my mom's expenses, believing it held us together. But my parents always favored my sister, showering her with cash and gifts while I got nothing but demands. I swallowed it, thinking that's what family does. Then one Sunday dinner at our home in Savannah changed it all. Mid-meal, my parents stared me down and said, "You're not part of this family." Their words stung like a slap. They called my sacrifices control, my help a show-off. I gripped my glass, forced a nod, and said, "Understood." Weeks later, they flooded my phone begging for money. I replied, "I'm not part of the family, remember." That was the moment I took back my life. How did I go from family ATM to cutting them off? Stick around to find out. If you've ever felt used by those you love, drop a comment, smash that like button, and subscribe to see how I found my freedom. Everything started when I was a teenager in Savannah. My older sister, Dana Parker, was the center of our family's universe. 3 years my senior, she basked in the glow of my parents' Nancy Parker and Edward Parker undying favoritism. I was the invisible one, always measured against Dana's charm and never quite enough. Their love for her wasn't just words. It showed in every action, every choice. Mom would slip Dana cash for new outfits, dresses, jackets, whatever caught her eye. Dad surprised her with a sleek phone for her 18th birthday, while I made do with a cracked second-hand one. Dana's birthdays were events, parties with balloons, gift cards, even a used car when she turned 20. Mine a card, sometimes nothing at all. "You're the responsible one," Jocelyn Mom would say, brushing off my disappointment. Dana reveled in it, tossing her hair and boasting about how Mom and Dad adored her. I bit my tongue, hiding the sting, hoping one day they'd notice me. I poured my energy into school. Late nights with textbooks grinding through math and science became my refuge. My hard work paid off with a full scholarship to Georgia Tech. Dana didn't care, too busy flaunting her latest gifts. Mom and Dad skipped my high school graduation, saying they were tied up with Dana's job applications. I stood on that stage alone, gripping my diploma, vowing to rise above their neglect. At 22, I graduated with a software engineering degree and landed a job in Savannah. The pay was solid, but my family's needs quickly ate into it. Dad's heart condition meant endless medical bills, so I covered them. Mom needed help with groceries and utilities, and I sent money every month. Dana, scraping by at a boutique job, couldn't pay her apartment rent, so I took that on too. I told myself it was what families do, even if it drained me. The favoritism never let up. Mom called Dana our pride, gushing over her smallest gestures like buying a single bag of groceries. Dad would hand Dana cash for extras, which she spent on shoes or nights out. I got no thanks, just more demands. One Christmas, they gave Dana a sparkling necklace. My gift, a plain mug. I smiled through it, but my chest ached. Dana would call crowing about Mom's praise or Dad's handouts. "They know I'm special." She'd laugh. I'd hang up, staring at my laptop, wondering why my efforts were invisible. The comparisons cut deepest. "Why aren't you more like Dana?" Mom would snap when I questioned sending more money. Dad stayed silent, his quiet agreement sharper than her words. I started tracking my sacrifices, not out of spite, but to remind myself I was doing something. 8 years of giving, of putting them first, and I was still the outsider. I wasn't their daughter. I was their safety net. By my late 20s, I was worn thin. My best friend, Kristen Shaw, saw it. "They're using you," she'd say over coffee. I'd nod, but I wasn't ready to admit it. I kept giving, clinging to the hope that my sacrifices would earn their love. I'd work late coding until my eyes burned, believing I could fix our family. I was wrong, but I didn't see it yet. Last fall, I decided to host a Sunday dinner at home. I wanted to bridge the gap with my family, to create a moment where we could feel like one unit again. For weeks, I planned every detail, determined to make it perfect. I spent hours in the kitchen preparing roast beef, mashed potatoes, and a warm apple pie, sinking $200 into ingredients and decorations. I set up the dining room in our Savannah home, arranging candles and a crisp tablecloth, hoping the warmth would soften years of distance. My best friend Kristen Shaw came over early to help. She chopped vegetables and stirred gravy, her laughter filling the kitchen. But as we worked, she noticed Mom's clipped tone when I called to confirm the time. "Nancy seems off." Kristen whispered, her brow furrowed. I brushed it off, blaming Mom's usual stress, but a knot formed in my stomach. I wanted this night to work to prove I could bring us together. When the family arrived, the mood started light. Dana, my sister, breezed in, tossing her purse on the couch and complimenting the food's aroma. Dad nodded approvingly as he took his seat, and Mom even smiled briefly when I passed the roast beef. "This looks good, Jocelyn," she said, her voice softer than usual. For a moment, I let myself hope. We sat around the table, passing dishes, the clink of forks mixing with small talk about the weather and Dana's latest shopping trip. Then Mom's tone shifted. As I refilled her glass, she leaned back and said, "So Jocelyn's still throwing your money around at that tech job." Her words carried an edge, sharp and sudden. I paused, caught off guard, and forced a laugh. "Just doing my part, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice steady. But she didn't stop. "You act like you're better than us, always paying for things," she added, her eyes narrowing. The table went quiet. I glanced at Dad, hoping he'd step in, but he stared at his plate, cutting his meat in silence. Dana smirked, swirling her wine. "Yeah, Jocelyn, you don't have to show off," she said, her laugh light but cutting. My face burned, but I bit my tongue, not wanting to ruin the night. Kristen jumped in, trying to shift the mood. "Hey, this pie is amazing. Did you make it from scratch?" she asked, her voice bright. I shot her a grateful look, but Mom ignored her, turning to Dana. "You're so good at hosting, Dana." "You should have done this," she said, her praise pointed. Dana grinned, soaking it up while I gripped my fork tighter. The jabs kept coming. Mom criticized my fancy job, saying I spent too much time working and not enough with family. "You're always so busy, Jocelyn. No wonder we barely see you," she said, her voice dripping with blame. I tried to respond calmly, explaining my long hours, but she cut me off. "Dana makes time for us," she snapped. Dad stayed silent, his eyes fixed on his food as if he could will the tension away. Dana chuckled again, tossing her hair, clearly enjoying the spotlight. Kristen tried again, asking Dad about his old fishing trips, but Mom steamrolled over her. "You think you're the big provider, don't you?" she said to me, her tone venomous. "We don't need your charity." My chest tightened. I'd spent years covering their bills, their rent, their groceries, and now it was charity. I forced a smile, but my hands shook under the table. Dana sipped her wine, smirking as if this was all a game. Kristen touched my arm, her eyes worried, but I shook my head slightly, signaling her to stay out of it. By the time we reached dessert, the air was thick with tension. I served the apple pie, hoping to salvage the night, but Mom's words echoed in my head. I felt like an outsider in my own home. My efforts mocked, my sacrifices twisted into something ugly. Disappointment sank into me, heavy and cold. I looked around the table, Dad avoiding my gaze, Dana basking in Mom's favor, Kristen watching me with concern, and realized this dinner wasn't bringing us closer. It was tearing me apart. In the middle of dessert, my mother locked eyes with me. The apple pie sat untouched on my plate, the dining room heavy with silence after Nancy's earlier jabs. I braced myself, sensing something worse was coming. Nancy leaned forward, her voice low and sharp. "Jocelyn, you're not part of this family," she said, each word slicing through the air. Edward, sitting beside her, nodded slowly, his face hard. "You think you can control us with your money?" he added, his tone colder than I'd ever heard. My heart stopped. The room spun, their accusation hitting like a tidal wave. I stared at Nancy, then Edward, waiting for a sign. They didn't mean it. None came. My chest ached, years of sacrifices, medical bills, rent, groceries flashing through my mind. I'd poured everything into them, and this was their truth. Dana smirked, leaning back in her chair as if she'd known this was coming. Kristen's hand froze on her fork, her eyes wide with shock. I wanted to scream to demand why, but my throat tightened. Instead, I set my fork down, my hand steady despite the storm inside. Understood? I said, my voice calm, almost cold. Nancy blinked, caught off guard, but said nothing. The weight of their words sank in. They didn't see me as family, just a wallet, a tool to keep their lives afloat. I'd spent $200 on this dinner, every cent from my own pocket, hoping to mend us. Now it felt like a cruel joke. I pushed my chair back, the scrape against the floor deafening in the silence. I'm done, I said, looking at Nancy, then Edward. I'm done paying for everything. Dana's smirk faded, her wine glass pausing midair. Edward's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, his eyes avoiding mine. Nancy's face hardened, but she didn't respond. I stood, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. I'd given them years, emptied my savings, and carried their burdens, all for this moment of betrayal. No more medical bills, no more rent, no more bailing them out. I'd paid for this dinner $200 for food and decorations, and I wouldn't ask for a dime back. It was my final act as their daughter. Kristen stood too, her hand brushing my arm. Jocelyn, let's go. She whispered, her voice soft but urgent. I nodded, unable to look at my family any longer. As I walked toward the door, Kristen followed, her presence a quiet anchor. I grabbed my coat, my hands trembling, not from anger but from the raw hurt tearing through me. I'd spent my 20s trying to earn their love, believing my sacrifices would make me enough. Now I saw the truth, they'd never valued me. I stepped outside, the cool Savannah air hitting my face. Kristen pulled me into a hug, her arms tight. You don't deserve this, she said, her voice fierce. I nodded, tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Behind us, the dining room was still. Nancy, Edward, and Dana sat frozen at the table, their plates half-eaten, the pie growing cold. They didn't call after me, didn't move to stop me. The silence was louder than their words, confirming what I'd always feared: I was never truly theirs. I closed the door behind me, the click final like a lock snapping shut. Kristen squeezed my hand and we walked to her car. I didn't look back. In that moment, I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving behind years of trying to prove my worth. I'd been their daughter, their provider, their safety net, but never their family. The hurt was sharp, but beneath it, a spark of clarity grew. I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd find my own way, free from their expectations. Kristen drove us away, the lights of my home fading in the rearview mirror. I took a deep breath, the weight of their words still heavy, but my decision was made. A week later, I saw their posts on social media. My phone buzzed relentlessly, each alert a new jab. Nancy had posted on Facebook, her words sharp and public. Jocelyn walked out on her family, too selfish to care. Edward's status was subtler, but no less cutting, hinting at my disloyalty without saying my name. Dana took to Twitter, her thread vicious, branding me as ungrateful and cold, claiming I'd abandoned them after everything they'd given me. Comments from strangers and distant cousins poured in, painting me as the heartless one. I sat in my Savannah apartment, scrolling through their lies, my chest tight with disbelief. They'd erased years of my sacrifices, medical bills, rent, groceries, like they never happened. The betrayal stung worse than I'd expected. After that dinner, I knew they'd lash out. But seeing my name dragged online felt like a public execution. I gripped my phone, tempted to respond, to lay out every dollar I'd spent keeping them afloat. But I stopped. Their words didn't deserve my energy. I closed Twitter, set my phone face down, and let the silence settle. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I'd walked away from that role, and I wouldn't let their posts pull me back. 3 weeks later, the calls began. Nancy was first, her voice a mix of urgency and irritation. Jocelyn, Edward's medical bills are piling up. You need to help, she demanded. I stood in my kitchen, staring out the window at the Savannah skyline. I'm not part of the family, remember? I replied, my voice calm but unyielding. She sputtered, launching into a tirade about my selfishness, but I ended the call. My pulse steady. The next evening, Edward called, his tone gruff, asking for money to cover household expenses. "You said I'm not family, so I'm done helping," I said firmly, cutting through his excuses. He went silent, then hung up. Dana called last, her voice whiny, begging for help with her rent. "I'm not your bank anymore, Dana." I told her my words, sharp and final. She tried to argue, but I hung up before she could finish. Kristen was my rock through it all. I invited her over after Nancy's call, needing her perspective. We sat on my couch, the glow of my laptop showing their latest posts. "They're trying to break you," Kristen said, her voice thick with indignation. "You've given them everything, and they're twisting it." She squeezed my hand, her eyes fierce. "You're stronger than this, Jocelyn. Don't let them win." Her support was a lifeline, reminding me I wasn't alone. She'd seen me pour my life into my family, and now she was here cheering my decision to stand firm. Each refusal felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I'd spent years tying my worth to their needs, believing it made me a good daughter. Now I saw the truth. I'd been their crutch, not their family. Saying no wasn't just about money, it was about breaking free. Guilt tugged at me, whispering that I was letting them down, but I pushed it aside. Every call I turned away, every plea I rejected made me feel lighter. I wasn't just setting boundaries, I was building a new foundation, one where I came first. By the 5th week, their social media campaign faltered. Nancy's posts got fewer reactions, Edward's cryptic updates faded, and Dana's threads lost steam. Their narrative was unraveling, and I didn't need to fight to prove them wrong. I started sleeping through the night, my shoulders no longer tense. Kristen noticed the change, grinning when I laughed freely over dinner. "You're you again?" she said, raising her glass. I smiled, feeling the weight of years lifting. For the first time, I wasn't carrying their burdens. The relief was tangible. My headaches eased. My nights were calm, and I stopped bracing for their calls. Their words online still lingered, but they no longer defined me. I was Jocelyn Parker, a software engineer who'd built her own life in Savannah, not their ATM or their villain. I'd drawn a line, and it held strong. Their accusations couldn't touch me anymore. I was free to choose my path, and I chose myself. 6 months later, I and Kristen sat at a bustling Savannah cafe, the hum of conversation blending with the clatter of dishes. She mentioned in passing that she'd heard nothing new about Nancy, Edward, or Dana, no apologies, no attempts to reach out. The silence from them was deafening, a confirmation of the divide I'd drawn. I nodded, unsurprised, and shifted the conversation to my work. My career had become my anchor, a space where I could rebuild without the weight of their expectations. After walking away from that dinner, I'd thrown myself into my job as a software engineer. My company had offered me a lead role on a new project, a chance to oversee a team developing an app for local businesses in Savannah. I'd hesitated at first, unsure if I could handle the responsibility, but the memory of Nancy's words, "You're not part of this family," pushed me forward. I wasn't just proving them wrong, I was proving myself right. I took the role, diving into late-night coding sessions and team meetings, my confidence growing with each milestone we hit. The app launched successfully, earning praise from clients and a promotion to senior engineer. Kristen listened as I shared this, her eyes bright with pride. "You're killing it, Jocelyn," she said, leaning back in her chair. "They don't get to claim any of this." Her words hit deep, reinforcing what I'd been working through with my therapist, Dr. Ellen Gray. I'd started seeing Ellen 2 months after the dinner, needing clarity on the guilt that lingered from cutting ties. In our sessions, she helped me reframe my choice. "You're not abandoning them," Ellen told me, her voice calm but firm. "You're choosing to invest in yourself." Her guidance, paired with Kristen's fierce support, gave me permission to prioritize my own path. My days were now filled with purpose. I mentored junior developers, guiding them through complex code and watching their skills grow. I pitched ideas to our CEO, proposing features that streamlined user experiences. One of my suggestions, a tool for small businesses to track customer data, became a company priority, and I led the team that brought it to life. The work wasn't easy, deadlines loomed, and bugs tested my patience. But every challenge felt like a chance to grow, not a burden to carry. I was no longer the daughter who paid for everything, but a leader building something meaningful. The absence of Nancy, Edward, and Dana was stark. No calls came, no messages to mend what they'd broken. I'd half expected a text from Dana, maybe a grudging apology from Nancy, but their silence spoke volumes. They'd meant what they said. I wasn't their family. At first, that truth cut deep, but now it fueled me. I didn't need their approval to thrive. My office, filled with sticky notes and humming monitors, was my new home. My colleagues respected me not for what I could give, but for what I could do. Ellen helped me see this clearly. In one session, I told her about the promotion, how it felt like a milestone I'd earned alone. "You've built this?" "Jocelyn," she said, her smile warm. "Your worth isn't tied to them." I carried her words with me, letting them sink in during quiet moments. Kristen echoed this over coffee, her voice fierce. "You're not just surviving, you're shining," she said, raising her cup in a toast. Their support was a lifeline, a reminder that I'd found a new kind of family, one that valued me for me. My career became a canvas for my ambitions. I enrolled in an online course to learn advanced machine learning, spending weekends studying algorithms. I spoke at a local tech conference, my voice steady as I shared our app's impact. The audience's applause felt like a validation I'd never gotten from Nancy or Edward. I was no longer the invisible daughter scrambling to please them. I was Jocelyn Parker, a woman carving her own legacy in Savannah's tech scene. The lack of contact from my family cemented my resolve. They hadn't reached out, not even to fake remorse. Their silence was their choice, just as my career was mine. I'd spent years tethered to their needs, but now I was free to chase my goals. Walking out of the cafe with Kristen, I felt a quiet strength. My life was no longer about proving my worth to them, it was about proving it to myself. My career was my proof, each success a step away from their shadow. A year later, I heard about their struggles. Kristen shared the details over a quiet dinner at my Savannah apartment, her voice steady, as she passed on what she'd learned from old acquaintances. Nancy and Edward had lost their house, unable to keep up with the mortgage debt after I stopped covering their expenses. They'd relocated to a modest rental on the city's edge, their lives a shadow of the comfort they once knew. Dana, who'd leaned on my money to sustain her lavish lifestyle, was now working long hours at a retail store, stocking shelves and ringing up purchases. She'd moved into a cheaper apartment, her days of carefree spending replaced by a grind she'd never anticipated. The news stirred a complex wave of emotions. I imagined Nancy sorting through their belongings, her pride stung, and Edward, once so vocal, now quiet in defeat. Dana, who'd always expected me to bail her out, was learning the weight of independence the hard way. I didn't take pleasure in their fall. There was no victory in watching them falter. But their struggles laid bare a truth I'd come to accept. They'd relied on me to prop up their lives, and without me, their choices caught up with them. Kristen set down her fork, her gaze firm. "You gave them everything, Jocelyn, and they threw it away," she said. "This is on them." Her words anchored me, a reminder that I wasn't responsible for their collapse. Reflecting on that dinner a year ago, I saw how their words, "You're not part of this family," had shifted my world. For years, I'd poured my energy into meeting their demands, believing it proved my worth. Their rejection forced me to confront that lie. I'd walked away not out of spite, but to reclaim my life. Kristen had been there every step, cheering my growth, her loyalty a stark contrast to the family who'd discarded me. Over coffee one evening, she'd said, "You're stronger than they'll ever know." Her faith in me was a gift, a mirror reflecting the resilience I'd built. The lesson was clear, carved from the pain of that night. Family isn't just blood, It's the people who value you who respect your boundaries. I'd let Nancy, Edward, and Dana define me for too long, tying my worth to what I could provide. Cutting them off taught me to stand firm, to see my value beyond their demands. It wasn't easy. Guilt crept in at times, whispering that I'd abandoned them. But each milestone, each day I chose myself, drowned out those doubts. I'd built a life surrounded by people like Kristen, who saw me for who I was, not what I could give. Their consequences were a reflection of their actions. Nancy and Edward's reliance on me had hidden their financial recklessness, leaving them unprepared when I stepped back. Dana's entitlement had shielded her from reality, and now she faced the consequences of her choices. They'd expected me to return to keep carrying their burdens, but I hadn't. Their struggles weren't my failure, they were the result of their refusal to see me as more than a resource. I'd learned to let go, to let them face the life they'd chosen. To everyone who's followed my story, thank you for staying until the end. This journey was about more than a single dinner. It was about finding my strength, setting boundaries, and choosing myself. If this speaks to you, reflect on your own life. Where do you need to draw a line? Your worth isn't in what you give others, it's in who you are. Please share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear how you've faced your own challenges. And if this story moved, you consider subscribing to the channel for more like it. Your support means everything. I stood on my balcony that evening, the Savannah skyline stretching before me. I wasn't the daughter they'd cast aside anymore. I was Jocelyn Parker, whole and free, with a life I'd forged on my own terms. Their struggles were theirs to bear, but my peace was mine to keep, too.